So E3 is coming up, and as I've been going through some stuff as the lead up to the biggest gaming event of the year begins, I'm realizing there is a lot I want to talk about before E3 actually kicks off, and I figured we'd start with something pretty straightforward. The big draw of the show is obviously the games, and today I want to focus on games that have already been announced. I'll talk about, surprises I want to see in another video. But for today, every game on this list we know exists. However, they may or may not be confirmed to be showing up in some form at the show. But nevertheless, they're games I'm either hoping to see or excited to see. I want to see these games. These are the top 10 announced games I want to see at E3 2018.
Ain't no such thing as civilized.
You're the only one of these fools that I trust.
Rockstar is on top of the world right now as they continue to just make stupid amounts of money off of Grand Theft Auto 5. What was it, like 90 million in sales last time I checked? Just insane. And while I think we can all appreciate the GTA series, I'm much more of a Red Dead Redemption guy. The first Red Dead Redemption game, not necessarily the first Red Dead, but Redemption 1, was a super impressive game, thrusting you into the Wild West. And when it comes to taking advantage of console hardware, I mean, Rockstar is one of the best. And from the looks of what we've seen so far for Red Dead Redemption 2, this game appears to be no exception. And we recently learned that the game is actually sort of a prequel, maybe even more so kind of a side story that will intertwine with the original game. In the most recent trailer, it was confirmed that John Marston, the first game's protagonist, will at least be making an appearance in this game, so it'll be interesting to see how they build off the first game narrative-wise. More like GTA 5 though, beyond a giant single-player campaign, I think we can expect an ample amount of multiplayer offerings, as that has been where GTA 5 has been pulling in the big numbers, both player and money-wise. There has been talk of all sorts of multiplayer content being in this game, including possibly some sort of battle royale element. I've said it in past videos, I think this E3 you better prepare yourselves to see a lot of games getting a battle royale-esque sort of mode, and it would definitely make sense here. Some people may worry about too much multiplayer focus detracting from the campaign, but I don't think that's something you have to deal with Rockstar. When they put these games out like a GTA 5, they deliver big in both categories. So if you're only looking for single player or you're only looking for multiplayer or both, I don't think you can go wrong. So with Red Dead Redemption 2, I have no such fear.
They say the time of heroes is over. That if you're different, you're dangerous. But I know the truth. The world will always need heroes.
When it comes to superhero games, everyone's talking about the new Spider-Man on PS4, which admittedly looks great, but it is one of those games I feel I've seen enough of. I'm already sold, the game's coming out in September. I don't really need to see much more of it, but there is another Marvel superhero game waiting in the wings. Yes, I want to get an update on that Avengers Project game from Square Enix. Yeah, I haven't forgotten about it. We got this brief teaser in January of last year, and details since have been practically non-existent. From the little we have heard, it sounds very likely the game will be in third person. They did mention they plan to have people playing this game, quote, for years to come, which may suggest an MMO. Now, I know the idea of an MMO scares a lot of people off, but it sounds like it may actually be more of a instance-based, shared world kind of experience, at least hopefully something you can choose how or if you want to even share your world. With the theme being Avengers, obviously I think people are going to want to team up with other players and be that superhero team, but at the same time you don't want to be dealing with, a bunch of trolls, people goofing off and totally breaking your immersion. In terms of the game itself, I do hope that they actually have players playing as Marvel heroes, not created heroes that exist in this world. I feel like that just never really works. More often it seems Players want to be the real heroes, and when you create your own character, it feels like you're just kind of cosplaying as a hero. You want to be the real ones. But regardless of what this game is going to be, there will never, and I mean never, be a better time to start marketing it than the present. Avengers Infinity War just came out in theaters, and Part 2 is set to release in May of next year. If they actually plan this thing right, it will be releasing relatively soon. Like, if I had anything to do with it, I'd want this game coming out at least within the next year and a half. Any longer, and they're gonna blow their best window.
What's his name, anyway?
Cloud Strife. And he says it's former soldier. Look, heavy security like this, you want a professional.
The Final Fantasy VII Remake appears to be having a pretty troublesome development cycle. It was revealed back at, E3 2015? It was something fans have been demanding pretty much since remakes have existed, and things seem to be going well, at least initially. We even saw what appeared to be some gameplay. It looked like they were going to be going a much more action-oriented route than the original, but since we last saw the game, we've heard about it undergoing a lot of changes, redesigns, and that. So even though it was quite a while ago that we first heard about it, it's hard to estimate how far along the game actually is. But the game was, at least originally, going to be released in chapters or episodes, giving the team a chance to be working on later parts of the game while players were playing the earlier parts. So if that is still the case, we could be getting a new look at the game, a re-reveal of the remake, if you would, accompanied by at least a loose date of when that first part could be coming out. Even if it is like, Chapter 1 coming in 2019 or something, that's better than nothing. I think people will be down with pretty much any sort of update with this game, just to give them a little reassurance that it's at least back on track.
So I'll ask you once again, Samurai. Do you surrender?
This is probably the game I see the least amount of chatter about on this list. At E3 last year, we got a tease for the studio behind the infamous series Sucker Punch's next game, a far departure from superheroes in the modern day. Now we're taking a trip back in time to samurais in feudal Japan. Sort of a period game in a similar vein to Red Dead Redemption, actually, but I'm a bit more interested in this one. Now, this will obviously be more grounded in reality than, say, the infamous series. In fact, it takes place during real-world events, the Mongol invasion, and while we pretty much only got a bit of a teaser trailer for the game, there was a developer interview late last year where they talked at a fair amount of length about what players can expect from this title. It will be an open-world game that focuses on exploration. They mentioned they want players to see things, have things catch their eye, and feel pushed to just go check it out on their own. Similar to the power system in the infamous games, it appears you'll be shaping what sort of samurai you want to be. I'd expect different sorts of weapon specializations, along with techniques for those weapons, probably some various traps. I would assume archery could be a part of it. But also in this interview, perhaps most importantly, they mentioned that they have been working on this game for about 3.5 years. And again, this was late last year, so by the time E3 rolls around, that means it will be over 4 years in development, meaning it's probably pretty far along. I think if you own a PS4, you definitely want to keep an eye out for it.
Now, more than ever, undiscovered species are appearing. We call these creatures Pokemon.
I feel like I've already talked so much about Pokemon for the Nintendo Switch on this channel, and of all the games, this is the only one that I think we have a chance still of actually seeing it before E3. And yes, I'll agree, this game will certainly get its own direct no matter what at some point, but I think there's still a chance we'll get some sort of reveal for it at E3. Maybe they won't go super in depth, talking about specifics and that, but let's be real, people are going to explode if they just get a glimpse of this game in action. In fact, I could very well see it like closing out the show, being that just one more thing moment, and maybe even teasing the date of a future direct at the very end that would be fully dedicated to the next Pokemon. Hell, I think even a simple in-game screenshot would have people freaking out. I mean, we saw just how well that could work with that supposed screenshot leak a little while back, right? At the initial Nintendo Switch event last January, we got a tease for the upcoming Shin Megami Tensei 5. Now, being that this came all the way at the beginning of last year, you'd think, that would normally indicate that the game is probably pretty far along. But from what we've heard about this title's development, that may not be the case. Back in February of this year, the game's producer said in an interview that the game has just entered full-scale development, meaning before this, there was only a small team working on the game. Now they're fully staffed. Just because it may be early doesn't mean we won't get something, though. Nintendo fans always want to remind you, and this goes for probably all the Nintendo stuff on this list, oh, they're focused on games that are going to be released soon. They're not going to talk about that. It's too far off. Yes, that's their focus, but that certainly doesn't omit stuff that's further off. I mean, obviously last year, the two big games revealed at E3 for Nintendo were, let's say, extremely early. And as far as this game's place on the list, yes, this is definitely above Pokemon for me. To those of you not as familiar with this series, and the diehards will probably kill me for this, these games are sort of like Pokemon, but with demons. But the gameplay, particularly the difficulty, harkens a lot more back to old school, more traditional RPGs. And with the demons, there's more than just battling them. There's like conversations in that you can have with the demons. You can give them gifts to get them to befriend you. Even if you aren't familiar with the series, but you know about RPGs, this is Atlas, so obviously it's awesome. And the designs of these demons are always so fantastic. And in fact, if you're someone who's been on the fence about this, or maybe don't really know much about it, but attracted by that demon aspect, know that they mentioned, with the added power of the Switch, they're spending about 3 times as much time to model and create each demon as they have in past games. So, my god, these things are going to look so badass. Very hyped for this. Another game players have been waiting a long time for, that we also know has been in development for a very long time. This teaser originally came out all the way back in 2013. Yes, 5 years ago, this title was teased. CD Projekt Red's next game, Cyberpunk 2077. Their last game, The Witcher 3, delivered easily one of the best, most complete fantasy experiences in the history of gaming. And while we don't know anything about Cyberpunk 2077, it could very well be something totally different than the Witcher series, but most people are hoping for something similar, essentially The Witcher 3 but sci-fi. Obviously, the setting alone would require a lot of changes, but if they can build a world as rich and with as much to do as The Witcher 3 had, they could easily have another classic on their hands. Again, given their past work, a classic is what people are expecting, and when it comes to CD Projekt Red and the amount of time they've been at least working on this game in some form, I don't think that's expecting too much. Everyone loves Hideo Kojima, you love him, I love him, and now he is free from the shackles of Konami and we're going to see him get to realize his vision uninhibited in his new game, Death Stranding. Now, while this game is high on this list, I'm extremely excited to see more of it. There is a caveat here. We've technically been seeing Death Stranding for years now, but always these weird, out-of-context cutscenes that may or may not even be representative of the final game. If you follow Hideo Kojima, you know how much he likes to screw with people when it comes to these things, but I'm over it. If we get yet another of these random cutscenes, it's going to do absolutely nothing for me. In my opinion, another random cutscene is the same as if they show nothing. I want gameplay, period. Stop jerking us around. Let's see what this game is actually about. I think the first trailer for this was shown at E3 of 2016. So for 2 years now, we've been getting blasted with these cinematics just over and over again at various shows, E3, the Game Awards, PSX. They've been cool, don't get me wrong, they're well done, but I'm long past caring about them. Fingers crossed, at E3 we finally get gameplay for Death Stranding. Similar to the vein of Pokemon, Metroid Prime 4 isn't a sure thing at all, but I think since both this and Pokemon were announced at E3 last year, there's a high probability we will see at least one of them in action at the show this year. The Metroid series was totally mishandled, mistreated, in my opinion, for years, until we got Samus Returns, and while that was technically Samus's return, it's right in the title, I want to see Samus return to her former glory. I'm a huge fan of the series, and I know it's not on the Pokemon level, the Zelda level, or the Mario level for Nintendo. I get that. But to not have a core entry in this series since The Other M, which at least for the character of Samus did way more harm than good, was a travesty. Now yes, we got Samus Returns, but to me, that was a taste. Metroid Prime 4 is the main event for Samus's comeback, and I can't wait to get my first look at it.
Biohazard 2.
With all the great games on this list, I wish I could say choosing a number one was difficult, but it really wasn't. I've said it in a bunch of past videos, Resident Evil is my favorite game series of all time. And in terms of my favorite game of the series, I go back and forth between RE4 and the remake of 1. Resident Evil 2, though, is probably the best of all the original PlayStation games, so the potential for how great this entry can be, being fully made from the ground up for current-gen hardware, is through the roof. And let me tell you, if the Final Fantasy fans feel like they're being tormented with how Final Fantasy VII has been handled, think of it this way, the Resident Evil 2 remake hasn't produced anything beyond just a video confirming that it's happening. Now, if we were still in a world where Resident Evil 6 was the last mainline entry in the series, I wouldn't be probably nearly as excited. I'd still be excited, but with 6, Capcom seemed firmly set on making action more of the focus for the series going forward, which likely would have been reflected in this remake. However, thankfully, we're not in that timeline. We're in the one where Resident Evil 7 is the most recent game in the series, the one where Capcom realized that returning to the horror roots is what fans want from this franchise. This makes me have so much more faith in what we'll see from the remake of Resident Evil 2, and since it's been so long since the remake of the first game, which came out back on the GameCube, I'm super curious as to how they're going to do this. Will it be similar to how they did the remake for the first one, or will it be something more akin to, say, RE4? Will it be something totally different? Who knows? But again, Capcom has really course-corrected with this franchise, so I'm insanely excited to finally see what they're going to do with it, hopefully at E3. And that's it. Those are the top 10 games, games that are announced, that I'm hoping to see at E3 this year. Like I said at the beginning, these aren't a sure thing, but there's a good chance we could see them. Let me know which games you're hoping to see at E3 this year in the comments. As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.